Right, now it's time to flatten the face of the neck, and I've got it sitting in a vise here which is locked into position to give me a nice angle at which to plane, and it's sitting on a piece of wood here. This is actually the offcut from the body, a piece of Spanish cedar. So what I'm going to do as I plane is really very simple. I'll keep checking this way so that it's level, and I'll keep checking this way so that it's flat. Well, in fact, what I might do to start with is mark the entire face of the neck and plane until the pencil lines are gone, and then I'll gradually mark off high spots and work down. And I'll be checking against the truss rod and trying to get it so that when this is all flat, the truss rod sits perfectly. I may need to deepen the channel. Now the plane I'm actually going to use for this is a Stanley number 6. I was thinking of a 7, but I think I'll use a 6 today, just because of the space I have to work in. This is sometimes called a 4 plane or just a short jointer plane. It's a really good plane to use. It's a great size for apartment building. With longer planes, you can find that you'll bump into things on the backstroke, which can be really embarrassing. But a 6 is about perfect. A 5 would do just as well, but I just like the 6. And as you might notice, I'm planing at a slight angle. This just happens to give a better result with the cuts. Look at those beautiful long mahogany shavings. Look at that. Super thin, really good. It's a very nice plane to use. That's now perfectly flat. If we come in with our fingerboard, the two of them go together, they're going to mate together perfectly. Now, something else I should have mentioned about the fingerboard is another advantage to gluing it when it's flat is that you can apply even clamping pressure right to the edge. You see, after a fingerboard is radiused, you've got a thick bit here and thinner bits here. So when you clamp, more pressure tends to go here and less on here, which means that the edges can sometimes come up and create tiny little gaps. But when you clamp a flat fingerboard, the pressure across the board is even, and that allows you to do a much better job. Right, here's the neck with the truss rod set in. What I've done here is really quite straightforward. I deepened the channel just a touch to make sure everything was flush. Then when I put the truss rod in, I used this stuff, which is actually like a silicone gel. You can get the same stuff from a hardware shop just about anywhere in the world, I imagine. You use it for sealing around windows and things. And the virtue it has is it stays soft. And I packed it in the bottom of the channel, especially around the ends. Packed a little tiny bit of sawdust over those just for personal reasons. It makes it easier to sand the face of it back, and it'll accept glue a little bit better. I'll run some silicone caulking and a few spots along here, and the reason why you do that is it stops truss rod rattle. I've actually made a neck once where I put the whole thing together and I put on the fingerboard and it was all nice, and then the weather changed and the truss rod just started rattling. It's really frustrating. So a little bit of silicone stops that problem. Up here you can see a small maple stopper which I've cut into the correct shape. It's sitting proud at the moment, and that's gone into this little slot so that we've now got the nut for adjusting the truss rod sitting down here, and the Allen key will go in there. This will become our truss rod access cavity. This will get planed flat, and then when the whole thing's put together, a little screw will go in there which will attach the truss rod cover. Now here's a little trick that's kind of worth knowing. When the fingerboard is clamped on, you're going to have a problem because sometimes fingerboards will shift a little bit under glue. So what I do is I create some little guides. You can see them here. I drill some tiny holes and I put in some short lengths of paper clip because it's very tough wire. Then when the short lengths are glued in and the super glue has set, I simply trim at an angle which creates essentially a small sharp nail. When the fingerboard is clamped in place, these nails, I've got a couple here and a couple here, will prevent it moving around. Okay, something else worth mentioning at this point perhaps is the glue I'm going to use. I'm going to use something called hot hide glue. And the way you do this is you get granules of the glue, which is an animal glue. You measure it out, you add some water, you let it sit for a couple of hours until the granules swell, and then you heat it up, and what will happen is you'll get a very smooth glue. The proportions I used 40 grams of hot hide glue granules with about 68 grams of water. You should measure by weight, not by volume, for consistency. Hide glue has a lot of advantages. The biggest advantage of hide glue is that when you've got two surfaces and you put a normal glue on them, the two surfaces will sit there, you have to clamp them to force them together, and then the glue will join them. With hide glue, you put the glue on the two surfaces, and as the glue dries, it pulls them together. You still need to clamp most joints, but you can sometimes do something called a rubbed joint. Rub two joints together and they'll get pulled together. Of course I will clamp, but hide glue is very good for that reason. It's also reversible. You can get it off old violins. You know, you can take the top off by heating and just take the top straight off. So hide glue is really, really good stuff when it comes to guitar repairs. Another advantage is that hide glue dries very, very hard. And some luthiers, professional luthiers, think that a hide glue joint between two surfaces actually creates a superior tonal texture. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit of a cork sniffer, but there aren't many glue joints on this guitar, and so I thought, well, I'll use hide glue. Why not? I've got some, I've used it before, it's good stuff. Right, we're ready for the gluing. Now, I'm actually going to try and do this fairly quickly, because the hot hide glue doesn't have a long working time. Basically, what I'm going to do is brush on the glue. There's a strip of tape here. I'm going to remove that, then I'm going to clamp on the board, and then I'm going to add the clamps. I've already done a test clamping. So I'll begin by putting on my hot hide glue, and I'll be generous with it. There we go. I think that ought to do us. Now I set the brush aside, I pull off this middle strip, and then on goes my board. I've got my lines drawn so it can be matched up fairly quickly. Now, with my board in place, I put on this freshly planed caul. It's freshly planed so I know it's nice and flat. Then I secure it here. Good. And I secure it here. Well, one of the many positives about hot hide glue is the fact that you can actually clean up the excess just with water, which is really nice. Just dampen a cloth, run it over, and away comes your excess. Just tighten the clamps one more time, and there we have a fingerboard and a neck joined together. Now, it's simply a case of cleaning up and letting it dry.